since we do have quorum. We will first get some information from our technical facilitator.
All right, welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. The chair, clerk, and technical facilitator are responsible for muting and unmuting committee members. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. During any roll call, all panelists will be unmuted briefly. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it in the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. First, we have public comment, and to my knowledge, there is no public comment. Is that correct, Heather? Okay. Then moving on, communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Are there any disclosures or recusals? Seeing no raised hands, we will move on to the minutes of the January 24th regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? So, seeing no raised hands, is there a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Commissioner Solheim and seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion to approve the minutes passes unanimously. Our schedule of upcoming meetings for regular meetings, our next one will be February 21st, followed by March 7th and March 21st. Then we do have a special meeting, work session on Thursday, March 24th, and that will start at 5 p.m. rather than our regular 5:30. So the March 24th meeting will start at 5 p.m. Next, I will take up the consent agenda. The consent agenda does include public hearing items as well as may include routine business and new business. And those things are included on the consent agenda on which staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by various city departments, and on which the applicant accepts those conditions. And there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the item. They're placed on the consent agenda and considered at the beginning of our meeting. Then people who are interested in those items can disconnect unless a member of the Plan Commission does request separation, in which case the item is removed from the consent agenda and taken in the regular course of business. Of the items before us today, the following are proposed for the consent agenda. And we do include referrals as part of the consent agenda. The first item is agenda item 5, which is a referral to February 21st. Also on the consent agenda are agenda items 6, agenda item 7, agenda items 10, 11, and 12. Are there any requests for separation of any of those agenda items? Seeing no raised hands, I will read those items then into the agenda. Again, for referral, agenda item 5, Legistar 68639, and then for approval, agenda item 6 and 7, which are to be considered together, Legistar 69273 and Legistar 68697, a substitute creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 10451 Old Sauk Road, 9th Alder District, from agriculture to traditional residential consistent 3 district, as well as approval of the preliminary plat and final plat of Fox Knoll on land addressed as 10451 Old Sauk Road and 621 Pioneer Road, 9th Alder District. Agenda item 10, Legistar 68715, located at 1301 Regent Street, 13th Alder District. Consideration of a conditional use in the traditional shopping street district for a restaurant nightclub. Agenda item 11, Legistar 69101, located at 6717 Odana Road, 19th Alder District. Consideration of a conditional use in the commercial center district for an animal boarding to allow an animal boarding tenant in a multi-tenant commercial building. And last, agenda item 12, Legistar 69715, reapproving the final plat for the Element District subdivision on land generally addressed as 5501 Mineral Point Road and 425 through 441 Charmony Drive in the 19th Alder District. I will open the public hearing, and having no registrants wishing to speak, I will close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Commissioner Cantrell. Moves approval, although you're muted, Commissioner. Thank you. And seconded by Commissioner Shepard. And I will assume unanimous consent to approve the consent agenda unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands to object, the consent agenda is unanimously approved. Now we will move back into our regular course of business. Under new business, agenda item 2, Legistar 69492, authorizing the City of Madison Planning Division to restart the Shady Wood Neighborhood Development planning process. And I understand we have a brief presentation by planning staff member Kirsty Lotch. Kirsty?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to share my screen and share a presentation here. One moment. Okay. So my name is Kirsty Latch. I use they, them, their pronouns. I work in the city's planning division, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jeff Greger, and we'll provide a brief overview of the Shadywood Neighborhood Development Plan process. So this planning area is on the city's southwest side, adjacent to University Ridge Golf Course. Let me grab my laser pointer. There we go. The golf course is here along Midtown Road and Woods Road. And the city prepared a draft Shadywood neighborhood development plan back in 2008 and 9. And at that time, there were some concerns from property owners in the area about the plan's recommended open space corridor for the Ice Age Trail. So in 2009, only a 40-acre Phase A portion of the plan was adopted, which is this section up here, which has since been developed with single-family homes. But the remaining 600 or so acres for the NDP were not adopted. But recently there's been some progress towards achieving this open space corridor for the Ice Age Trail, which is one of the main reasons why we feel that now is the right time to restart this NDP process. And I'll get into that in just a moment, but just a little background about other neighborhood development plans or NDPs. Shown in purple here are the recently updated NDPs, Hanson, Ratman, and Nelson. Reiner's in progress, although it's on pause for the moment, and we are anticipating restarting the Shadywood NDP, which is on the far southwest side there in green. A little more background. Much of the planning area is currently within the town of Verona. So this map came from, essentially, it was created for the intergovernmental agreement discussions that city staff recently had with the city of Verona. Ultimately, we did not reach an agreement with the city of Verona, but it wasn't completely unsuccessful. The city of Madison and Dane County and the city of Verona have just purchased property G here on this map, which shows in green the potential proposed open space corridor. So that was a recent purchase. And then since the 2009 plan, the city's also purchased this property, which is now Moraine Woods Park, adjacent to the recently purchased property G. And then the Bitzer family generously donated this smaller property here with a stipulation that it needs to be part of the open space corridor for the Ice Age Trail. So really the main component of this process will focus on this open space corridor, which will serve as a green buffer between the city of Madison and Verona. So here's the draft planning area map with the NDP planning area in red and the city boundary in the dashed black line. Just for your information, there's been some somewhat recent residential development west of the planning area here in the town. And the city of Verona has recently annexed some land here and approved residential development for that area, just south of Shady Oak Lane. But overall land within the planning area itself features unique natural features and a lot of interesting topography. Some, a really great segment of the potential Ice Age Trail corridor. And in addition, we anticipate that in this area, stormwater could also be another topic to focus on. And, generally, as all NDPs, we would also make recommendations about land use, transportation, parks and open space, utilities, and other city services. And then, finally, I wanted to just share our draft schedule. Here's a look at what we anticipate moving forward. We're compiling background data right now. We hope to have the first public meeting in the middle of March. We'll draft the plan, have a second public meeting, revise the plan as needed, and then go through the adoption process in July and August. So that's a broad overview, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions of Kirsty. Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you, Kirsty. I missed, you said something about you were unable to come to agreement with Verona, and I missed exactly what that was about. Is this entire area going to become part of the city of Madison? Is that, or is that still under discussion?
My understanding is I don't think we anticipate annexing much more of this into the city. However, I think I'm going to defer to my colleague Jeff, or Heather, and it looks like both of them could provide some more information about the intergovernmental agreement and background on that.
Sure. So we spent over a year negotiating with the city of Verona on a potential intergovernmental agreement. The boundary you see in red is kind of, it's essentially the boundary we agreed upon. There were other aspects that caused us not to move forward with an agreement. So generally the area within red would be expected to be in the city of Madison. Anything else would either be town of Verona or city of Verona. Town and city of Verona have an agreement in place that kind of carves up the areas west of the red line. So does that answer the question?
It does, really. So the expectation is that what's in the planning area will eventually be within the city of Madison.
Tony,
I'm sorry, couldn't hear you.
Yeah, Tony, could you speak up? Your microphone's going out again.
Sorry. So the expectation is that the area within that red line will eventually be city of Madison.
Yes.
Yep.
Is that all the questions you have, Commissioner Fernandez? And did that?
Yes, it is. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions of staff? Are there any other questions of staff? Okay, seeing none then. Thank you very much, Kirsty and Jeff, for being here with us and sharing that information. The next item on our agenda is agenda item 3, Legistar 69493, authorizing the development of a neighborhood plan for the Hawthorne Truax area. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes. Do we have to have a motion to reauthorize the plan of the Shady Wood neighborhood?
I'm seeing a yes from Heather. So could we get a motion to that effect? Thank you, Brad.
I'll recommend that the Plan Commission reauthorize the Shady Wood neighborhood development plan.
Thank you. And could we get a second, please? Seconded by Commissioner Shepard. Any discussion of that? Did you wish to speak to your motion at all, Commissioner Cantrell?
No.
Okay, thank you. We will then come to a vote. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thanks again, Commissioner Cantrell. Moving on to agenda item 3, Legistar 69493, authorizing the development of a neighborhood plan for the Hawthorne Truax area. And speaking on that with us tonight will be Linda Horvath.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to share my screen and several slides, which I will attach to Legistar tomorrow. So I apologize that those aren't on Legistar now, but it's just a few slides to help you better understand the neighborhood planning area that we are going to be embarking on. So the Hawthorne Truax neighborhood plan, the planning area is shown on the screen. It's generally bounded by State Highway 30 to the south, the rail tracks and Mendota Street to the east, Piersdorf Street to the north, and then Pearson Street and Carpenter Ridgeway Park to the west. I should have also mentioned I'm co-leading this planning process with Dan McCullough, who many of you know as well, and other team members on the team include Brianna Collins and Mary Rose Eckberg. She's a new staff member who's helping out in the arts and in planning. So this area also includes the Truax neighborhood, the Hawthorne neighborhood, and the residential areas of the Mayfair Park and Carpenter Ridgeway neighborhoods. We're planning here now for a number of different reasons, and one is that the area includes 51% or more people living with low to moderate incomes, and this qualifies the area for what we call community development block grant support for the neighborhood planning process. There's also a concentration of people who are living in poverty in this area, those who are housing cost burdened, and people from Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. In fact, this area includes about 40% of its population identifying as being people of color compared to citywide, where we have about 20% of people identifying as people of color. The planning area opportunities generally are that bus rapid transit, as we all know, is going to be coming up East Washington Avenue starting in 2024. State Highway 51 is about to undergo a redesign process. The Imagination Center will be located near this planning area relatively soon. And these are all opportunities that we want to take advantage of and to explore as we move forward. There's also an established community network in this area. We've got a number of organized neighborhood associations. The East Madison Community Center is located in the Truax neighborhood area. There's a number of community organizations that serve the area. So we want to build upon that network and work with that network as we move forward with the process. We also have an adopted neighborhood plan for this area. Folks on the call may not know that in 2001, the Carpenter, Hawthorne, Ridgeway, Sycamore, Truax neighborhood plan was adopted. And there are some recommendations in that plan, that adopted plan, that are still relevant today to this area. So we want to look at those and possibly bring them forward into this process. The purpose of this plan is to create a detailed framework for future growth and development within the elements of the comprehensive plan, and we want to really center the plan around equitable outcomes. We're trying to create healthy, viable, and stable neighborhoods, and also build resident capacity and leadership in the area so that folks can work better together and work with the city and other stakeholders. We're really centering for an approach, that community-driven approach with the plan. We're in the process right now of creating what we call a community partners group to help provide that community outreach and engagement expertise. And we're looking at working on this plan over the next 12 to 18 months. The plan itself will have a 10 to 15-year horizon. The recommendations will be aligned with the city budget process. And we're also all the time with these neighborhood plans looking for those community partnership opportunities to help with the plan implementation over time as well. Showing some draft scope items. We're really, again, at the beginning of this process. And these are some of the ideas that we have internally as staff for the scope. But we're just beginning that outreach with the community this week and next. And we are going to be building the scope as we talk more with community folks. You know, what do they see as priorities for this area and what's relevant to them that we want to pull forward into the planning process. But again, we use that community or that comprehensive plan as our framework. So we'll touch upon all of those usual elements, land use focus areas along the major corridors and opportunities for redevelopment, neighborhoods and housing. Well, we've got a lot of housing in this area that we might term naturally affordable. And so maybe look at preserving and enhancing what exists. But then also, what are those opportunities for creating new housing in this area? Look at the businesses and what they need, community services and programming, and so forth. Our draft timeline, we've begun the process. As you can see, we're building that community profile now, gathering the background data and analyzing it. Exploring assets, opportunities, and issues with city agencies, but also this week and next, starting that process with the community. Looking at drafting the plan materials starting in May through the summer. and getting that draft plan document ready later in the year for potential introduction toward the beginning of next year. So again, we're forming a community partners group to center that community-driven process here. And that's going to include representatives of the schools, Madison College, other property owners, neighborhood association groups, business owners, and other folks that are leaders in this area. We'll also host focus groups, public open houses like we typically do. We are already in conversation with Hawthorne Elementary School. That school is very interested in having some of their fifth graders, maybe fourth graders as well, engage with this process in about a month. We'll also look at doing stakeholder interviews, and then a lot of online type of things that we want to do with a community survey, online commenting map, and our typical listserv that we use. So that is an overview, and I'll pop back up to the aerial and kind of the opening slide in case anyone has questions about the specific area or other questions that you might have.
Are there any questions of Linda? Commissioner Fernandez.
Oops, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Linda, for that presentation. I want to ask about the schedule for the redesign of Highway 51. If you know what that timeline looks like and how does it relate to your timeline, are you going to be able to have input into their process?
Sure. Thank you for that question. So we do know a little bit about the timeline. I don't have all of the details on it, but they recently selected a consulting firm to run their redesign process. We are on their listserv to find out more, and we'll probably be reaching out more in the coming weeks to find out how we can better align the processes. I think that they probably, they're getting underway. We probably will be in that drafting of the plan phase, the recommendations, like I said, in the summer and into the fall, and they may only just be getting underway at that time. So the processes are not quite aligned the way we would, ideally like them to be, but we're going to try to collaborate as much as possible. Part of it is education for the community members that we are working with on this plan, to let them know that redesign process is getting underway and make sure they know how to plug into it if they want to be a part of it. We do, there are alternatives already up on the state's webpage that show alternatives from their past planning in this area. So we have some idea of what their designs might look like. We also, probably, so we're going to try to align as much as we can, but again, we're probably going to be kind of far along before they really get started with this go-round.
Thank you, Linda. Did that answer your question, Commissioner Fernandez?
More or less. I have to say, from my perspective, it's actually very good that we're out ahead of them, because the other way is not very useful. As their plans get more set in stone, they're less able to respond. So the degree to which our planning process can proceed ahead of theirs, we can provide better input to theirs. The main concern I have, having looked at this area for a long time, is crossings of Highway 51 in that area, particularly as you get near Rindle Park. There's a real strong need there that has not been filled up to this point, and somewhere between our plan and their plan, I think there needs to be a safer crossing of that highway. So maybe that's just editorializing, but
that's fine. Good. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Did you have any further questions, Commissioner Fernandez?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Linda, thanks for the presentation, and it's exciting to hear about the attention that's going to be given to a part of the city that I think could use some coordinated attention. But it brings up a question, and it might be for Heather. I'm not sure if it's for you or not, but I'm interested in how this neighborhood plan process fits into the larger discussion that Plan Commission is having about perhaps reinventing our planning processes with these with different areas that are that encompass several potentially existing neighborhood plans. And lately, most of what we've seen has been planning efforts in undeveloped parts of the city, but this is an already developed part of the city that we're starting a new process with. And I'm just wondering if for now even though Plan Commission is just starting to study this new planning framework, if this will intersect with that in a negative way or not.
Heather, could you respond to that, please?
Sure, I can start. I do want to say that Linda has been working in depth on that very question as well as part of a staff team working on that planning framework. We do hope to be back before you as a body in late March at that special meeting for a portion of that meeting to talk through the latest thinking on the planning framework. And I'll say that, yes, we've given that a lot of thought. We don't have the budget right now in 2022 to move forward with the support for the new planning framework. We anticipate that we may have that in 2023. I think the urgency with this plan, is really the out of date Carpenter Ridgeway, Sycamore, Hawthorne, Truax plan, but also this is the very last component of the east-west bus rapid transit route for which we don't have a contemporary plan, and so I think it's really important as we think of inclusive transit-oriented development and working, with neighborhoods to help define what that will look like, to go ahead with this plan and acknowledge that, it may be just a little bit messy if we embark on the new planning framework in 2023 or even late this year. But Linda might want to add how much thought has gone into the general idea of doing the larger plan areas, but having the opportunity to maintain focus on the CDBG or Community Development Block Grant areas within those larger plan areas. I don't know, Linda, if you want to add any thoughts now, or
Linda, did you have anything to add?
Just minor additions, because I think that was a great way of describing it, Heather. But essentially, this planning area that you see before you is a part of a larger area that is likely to be, or possibly will get underway later in the year or early next year. So we want to, that's also another reason for doing this plan now, is because we want to get out ahead of generally those larger area processes with the more focused CDBG areas, because the CDBG plan like this one involve a deeper dive into community outreach and engagement typically. And so that takes a little bit longer, to establish like that community partners group I was describing. Getting those folks on board and really working with them ahead of time is really important to us. So that's all I would add.
Okay. Thank you, Linda and Heather. Did that answer your questions?
It did. It did. Thank you to Heather and Linda. What Linda just had to say there, I think, was really important, and I appreciate the explanation.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Hagenow.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize for the tardiness of this, but I needed to disclose that my wife and I, we own a property in this neighborhood plan area here. So it will not affect my voting on this or at anything like that tonight. So,
thank you, Commissioner. Yeah. Thank you. Did you have anything else that you wanted to ask or add?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Shepard.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Just a real quick question about outreach. Do you have a strategy yet for reaching people by cell phone and also using social media? The reason I ask that is because for some people, they can't get to events, and also not everyone has home internet or a reliable home internet. So what, if any, strategies do you envision in terms of cell phones and also social media?
Sure, yes. So we are using, we can use cell phones. We can use and are planning to use social media. I think that your question is really, it's important, and we're in that process of developing that public participation plan, but we do want to take these kinds of suggestions into account as we continue to build that plan. So I appreciate that. And if you have any, specific ideas on use of cell phones or social media that you want to share, either now or outside of the meeting, we would love to take those.
Thank you, Linda. Did you have any follow-ups, Commissioner Shepherd?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff? Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. I have one kind of wonky comment that's going to come.
You're going to have to speak up again, Commissioner.
Are you hearing me now? I have one kind of wonky comment that's going to come up again with regard to the East Town plan, which is to label the railroad tracks. And I do notice a tendency to use the railroad tracks as a boundary for planning areas. But I just want to really encourage the planners to not allow that to become a boundary, a barrier. The same thing with Highway 30. It's when that becomes the edge of a planning area, it sometimes institutionalizes the boundary that's there, particularly with regard to the railroad tracks. I think it's important to label it, recognize it, and look at strategies for crossing it.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's some good input there. Anything else? Then I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
I will move that the Plan Commission authorize development of the Hawthorne Truax neighborhood plan area.
And do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Spencer. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any comments or discussion? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote. And I will assume unanimous consent of the motion unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Next is agenda item 4, Legistar 68802, adopting the Greater East Town Plan as a supplement to the comprehensive plan and directing staff to implement the recommendations contained in the plan. And we will hear from planning staff member Rebecca Kinnear. And I am there.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rebecca Kinnear. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm glad to finally bring this kind of completed draft plan to the Plan Commission tonight. It has been a long and winding road, as they say, with lots of changes and things that our great team, including Kirsty Latch, who is on the call tonight, Linda Horvath, Bill Fruling, Ryan Jonley, and Chris Wells. And together, we found a new way to facilitate as one of the first plans that started to use this new way that we're getting used to so much. So I just want to thank that team. And then I'm going to I'm going to run through this presentation pretty quickly because you have all seen a lot of this before. But I want to make sure, is everybody able to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. It did something funny on mine, so I'm glad it's working. So here we are. And as we know, we started with a planning area that nestles in quite nicely to the one that Linda was just talking about. So this is we're really pleased that she and her team is taking on that kind of gap between this plan and others that had been finished. And it's really large when you look at its comparison to the isthmus, and it just shows what impact a really large area like this can have for a planning effort. And we had a very robust public participation effort. We've talked about that with you in the past, but I'm always happy to go into it in more detail. But we're really proud of the shifts that we made, as well as some of the partnerships that we built with some of our
Rebecca?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I think it is showing the wrong screen of what you're intending to. It's not moving through the slides just yet.
Oh, wow. Okay. See, I just do it. My computer's being funny. Let me try this again. I'm really apologetic for that. Just gonna have to move something. This is not working. Display settings. Duplicate slideshow. Now, can you see something?
That's better. Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Thank you. So, hello. Here's our planning area. As I mentioned, I'm getting all the text from my team members telling me the same thing too, so I appreciate that live feedback. Here's the planning area that I talked about, and now it is not moving through for me. Oh, there we go. And it is really large. I said that before, but it is really large. If you look at it compared to the isthmus, this is a huge area that can have a lot of impact on the growth in Madison and opportunities in Madison. And we had this robust public participation, and I was so proud of the way that we pivoted and reached out to our chambers of commerce with the Hmong and Latino and Black chambers and building some of those relationships. That was new for me and many of our staff. And I'm happy with those relationships and the things that we did to try to look at this plan in a different way. Really, I'm going to go jumping right into the land use recommendations, and the first one is to look at this and change the comprehensive plan to reflect the vision of this plan, to begin some proactive rezoning and officially map 3 streets. Those are kind of the big recommendations that are coming out land use wise here. Okay, we're not moving. Come on. There we go. You can see that our comprehensive plan had a not very nuanced approach. It was mixed use and commercial, and that a lot has changed even in this area, especially in the idea of what commercial uses are and what the commercial market is and what that means. So this plan really tried to be both more flexible, but also kind of give a vision to this area that really reacts more to some of the current things that we've learned about our economy and some of the current things that we're doing with our transit system. The big changes really are that we want to tighten in the mixed use to where the mall is and along the BRT corridor on the East Washington Avenue, and then also start to create some areas where real neighborhoods could develop and create a place here, and limit some of our just general commercial more to the highway, the interstate that's on 9094 that's here, allow some more employment uses as that market starts to sift out and we figure out what that new market is. Due to the input that we got from the Plan Commission last time, we increased some of our heights along East Washington Avenue to really reflect those changes and push some of those heights towards the BRT line. So we can really see that larger, taller development that can really support that transit. We also have proposed a couple of proactive rezonings. This one is this tiny island of SRC1 that's right along Rindell Park there, and turning it into CCT. It's going from a suburban residential island to something that kind of allows flexibility for those property owners, but also maintains their ability to continue to live there. We also have the larger purple area that we'd like to rezone into RMX to really help both the community mixed use and that regional mixed use flourish along in those areas where we really want to see the most change. We'd also like to look at officially mapping 3 future rights of way. One is the extension of High Crossing. While we really want to see High Crossing come all the way across, we understand that we want to focus on the official mapping that's not going to be demolish any buildings. So trying to get that started here with the High Crossing Boulevard, an extension of East Springs along the southern portion here to open up some potential redevelopment in the parking lots of the mall, as well as a really important connection to the neighborhood that Linda's going to be studying more, which in Mayfair Park to allow the residents that live over here easier access over into this mixed use center that we're trying to create on Parkside Drive without having to go all the way up to East Washington, and trying to create a better grid system there as well. We have a couple of really big recommendations besides that. We talked to our traffic engineering colleagues, and we all agree that kind of conducting a corridor study of East Washington Avenue is of utmost importance right now as we continue to see a lot of accidents and issues with crossing. If we want this to become a mixed-use center that has a very active and successful BRT system, we really want that whole corridor looked at as part of that, as well as creating that new connected street work and the others that I have here. You can see some of those priority street connections. The priority street connections are ones that don't require demolitions. So we're saying those are the ones that could happen first as development happens. But those secondary street connections are there to show if demolition is proposed by a redevelopment, these are the streets that we'd like to have come in. We also have a map that shows our missing sidewalk links and where we need those to match up so we have a good sidewalk connection, as well as our bicycle connections that could be really robust in this area as development happens. Here's the bus rapid transit map that I mentioned. And I will go in and to Commissioner Fernandez's talk about the railroad corridor. That was indeed something that our Transportation Policy and Planning Board has suggested that we think is a really good idea here to, mark that railroad corridor and start thinking about, make sure that we talk about how that connects in. We have some culture and character recommendations specifically to think about the Urban Design District UDD number 5 to reflect the plan's goals and recommendations, as well as others to really think about how we can create dynamic community spaces in this planning area. We also have some neighborhoods and housing recommendations that really are there to encourage development of a wide mix of housing types and sizes and costs to really support all of the goals that we've been working throughout this planning process. One thing that the commission asked for last time was, a better idea about what that LMR, what that low density, low to medium residential use could be in that kind of southeastern corner. And we included some images to give a flavor of what we'd like that to look like, including an area that could have a park and some townhomes and mixed flats and stacked flats and that kind of general condition that allows for a wider variety. And here's some more images of that. We also looked at our economy and opportunity, and our growth projections from the urban footprint and some of our MPO staff's colleagues' work really show that 2,500 units could be easily built here. And they said in 15 to 25 years, but I even think that could even happen sooner as we see potential here. And it also shows a longer term capacity for an additional 7,000 plus housing units and significant commercial development. Some of the numbers that the urban footprint kind of assumed more office, and that's where we're going to see, some change and some potential to be both more housing and or more commercial. And we believe that a large amount of growth is really possible with or without the redevelopment of East Town Mall. But we think that, it would facilitate a lot more additional growth if the mall was redeveloped. Some of our economy and opportunity highlights include starting to do equity-based market studies so we can really support development of business incubators, preserve affordable commercial space, provide more opportunities for BIPOC business owners to start and entrepreneurs to start their businesses. A major one is really exploring the creation of a tax increment finance district here. We think a TID district here would make a lot of sense once we start to see some large development to help pay for some of those roads and open spaces. And one really interesting one that I thought was creating a cultural inclusion plan to help provide guidance to developers on how they can promote a diverse tenant mix. And that came out of some of our discussions, and that's one of those things that I think could be a tool in the future. We also have a lot of key green and resilient recommendations, including a pretty robust park plan effort, proactively engaging a diverse group of residents during those master planning for parks, enhancing the tree canopy, and also we've heard very loud and clear that protecting and enhancing the sensitive habitats in the Starkweather corridor is really going to be important as we move forward. We have a couple of maps here that show the tree canopy, which is pretty atrocious to see all of that red, but we also see some of our natural features, and this 200-foot buffer that we're showing around Starkweather Creek down here really shows some of those sensitive habitats. And the TPPD also asked us to really make sure that we're mapping that correctly and just double checking some of those maps and seeing, so our staff is doing that as we speak. Here is that natural or that open space map that we're looking at. some of our recommendations are going to be to enhance and expand Mayfair Park over here on the west side. Think about a larger community park. This map is it's very dense. So you have to kind of really look closely to see which way the lines go. But thinking about a larger community park down here on these horizontal lines, as well as thinking about some smaller neighborhood parks, that 2 to 5 acre size that could happen in in both of these areas. And lastly, thinking about kind of an urban space that could really make a mixed use district attractive and transformational. So here's some of those images that we put together so people can start thinking about what that could mean with a community park and smaller neighborhood parks, and that open space that could be more urban, managed potentially by a BID or a SID or an interagency team as we kind of look through that. One of our effective government recommendations is interesting when we looked at the school districts. And I know that you often look at school districts and where kids are going to live and what developments will go where. And it's really bifurcated along Zaire Road. And all of the kids to the east of Zaire Road will go to the Sun Prairie School District, and to the west will go to the Madison School District. So we talked with both school districts to talk about making sure that they're ready for these kids. And Sun Prairie said they indeed already bus some kids from some of the hotels and other spaces that are out here in this purple. And we just wanted to, put that on everybody's radar and to think about. We also want to think about the Rindall Imagination Center and what kind of community service and facilities needs will be missing after we create that really amazing center, because there still might be some that we need to talk about. So what did the future bring? We did a conceptual model to kind of show and help people really understand what this means. So these images do not show any current development proposals, and they're really only meant as a visual representation of what's possible. So here's that existing, the white are the existing buildings. East Washington Avenue is on the top of the screen there. Zaire Road here on the right and Lean Road on the bottom. As BRT comes in, I think we could expect some very early redevelopment along East Washington Avenue and Zaire Road in some of the very underutilized and empty parcels that have been empty for quite some time. I think we could also see, as some of our work with officially mapping and proactive rezoning, we could start to see some other development along some of those roads, those street connections that we've talked about, as well as, again, in the parking lots, as potentially the partial mall redevelopment and some of the emptier. We have lots of empty stores right now. What could happen if there was a partial mall development? We've seen that by the owners of this very mall in other cities where they've looked at that. And then, eventually, if something were to happen with the mall and they wanted to redevelop, there could really be a chance to think about a transformational space. This slide has a lot. I just have this one up so we can go back to it if we need to. But this is really the memo that we gave to you, what the different BCCs recommended for changes to the plan that are before you tonight. So I have this mostly if we need to go back and talk about it. So we visited lots of boards, commissions, and committees and got really great feedback and a lot of support for this plan. And we're here with you tonight. And hopefully on to Common Council in just a couple of weeks. So
Thank you, Rebecca.
I will stop.
Are there any questions for Rebecca about this plan? Commissioner Shepherd.
Hi, yeah, 2 quick questions. One, what will this, I know we're still working through the process, but what will this area look like? How will it be thought of? I put this in the context of malls used to be a destination. Will this area now be a destination for retail and or something else like services, healthcare, and that sort? Or will it become sort of its own, once again, sort of community and area? And then the second point is what you have envisioned here. Do you see models of this already existing in some other area, some other city, some other town across the United States? Is this original, or can you look at somewhere else? And once again, if it's in Minnesota or somewhere else, and say that's sort of what we're going for.
Sure. Excellent questions, Commissioner. Thank you. I think we do see this as creating, a new neighborhood. nobody lives, very few people live here right now, right? Just kind of around the edges. And we think with all of the growth that Madison's seeing that, it's a chance to, it's not a greenfield development, right? Because obviously but it's like really wide open. And I think it provides an opportunity that you don't get very often to really completely reimagine what a place could be. So with an influx of 7,000 housing units, if you think about what that creates, a whole small city, mixed with that potential of some mixed use and the BRT, I think we're seeing it as a complete kind of neighborhood, and a large neighborhood at that has even neighborhoods within that for some of the lower densities and the medium density housing. So I think we're seeing it as a complete neighborhood, as a destination, because there's events going on in the parks and things happening in that urban plaza. Farmers markets is always one that everybody brings up. But all those kinds of events that could happen. We had a lot of really great input from the high schoolers at East High that talked about some of the Latino festivals that they wish could be in a neighborhood like this, that could be close to where they live, right? Or, some kids that love the new global market that moved into the old Babies R Us, and how they want that feeling of places to go and visit. So we tried to take that in. In terms of does this place exist? Our team did extensive case studies pretty early on, and we are seeing to mixed success, right? Depending upon location and transit availability. From Milwaukee and Denver, we even saw the owner of this mall when they rebuilt a mall from scratch down in Pearland, Texas, they built almost this, which is interesting, from scratch when they wanted to redo it. Granted, that was in Texas and it was a greenfield development, so it's not redevelopment, but we've seen a lot of case studies across the country of malls going away and becoming something not unsimilar to this.
Thank you, Rebecca. Did you have any further questions, Commissioner Shepard?
Just two. One, if we could get some pictures or images of, once again, those models that you're using, that would be helpful for us to see, I think, at some point. And my final question is this part of do I dare say it, a transportation area overlay area? Because this is right off the interstate. I think of the East Town Mall as being, when you're driving through Wisconsin and you come up on Madison, I need to take a rest, you get off of the interstate and you go maybe to the mall and that sort. Will this area still serve, once again, that transportation demand? Thank you.
I actually think it'll make it a much more pleasant thing to do. There are some mixed-use developments just off of 94, just as you enter Milwaukee and Brookfield, that have been, again, a little bit more greenfield development, but they've been a mix of, there's a big Von Maur that you can see as you come into Milwaukee there. And there's some housing that went in and some pretty high-end commercial development. And I don't know that that's what we're looking for here, but certainly I think that it should provide more opportunity for people as they come in.
Okay. Will it have that designation, though? I'm just curious.
Oh, yes.
The transportation overlay.
Yes.
Okay.
We are looking at that. That was one of the recommendations in the culture and character section, I believe is where it is, that we think that this is absolutely a place where that could exist.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So my interest again is in connectivity with other neighborhoods or breaking down the barriers, and particularly if we look at the interstate as a barrier and the neighborhoods to the east of the interstate, there's kind of a bicycle map in there that envisions a couple of crossings of the interstate in that area. And I just want to really emphasize that I think that, first of all, both of those crossings would probably occur in railroad property, right? So they're really difficult crossings. And there also needs to be a direct crossing to the south. So I'm strongly encouraging that you show a bicycle connection across the railroad track in the vicinity of the creek crossing, somewhere between the interstate and, yes, somewhere in that area, you show kind of a parallel network north and south of that railroad almost tacitly agreeing that the railroad itself, could never be crossed. But that's an important crossing in my mind right there. You've got neighborhoods to the south. And then my question is also, doesn't City View today cross the railroad tracks? I know it's just outside your planning area, but I believe that's so. What I'm asking for again is that you show the railroad and that you indicate a crossing somewhere in the neighborhood west of the interstate and at City View Road if there's not already one there, because those neighborhoods are very cut off from each other if there isn't some way to get through that area.
Excellent, Commissioner Fernandez. The TPP agrees with you completely and has asked us to include those as well. I'm saying that even though staff said there are some difficult with some elevation changes in this area that we're talking about right here by where my mouse is, but the TPP asked us to put that recommendation in there that even if it's a little aspirational at this point, that would be a very important crossing as well. So as part of the staff's recommendation to adopt this plan with all of the TPP recommendations, that is included. So having the railroad shown on all of on the maps there and having that put there. Does that make sense?
Okay. Did you have any follow-ups, Commissioner Fernandez? I'm not hearing you.
All right. How about now? Yeah?
Yes.
How about on the question of City View Drive? Does that connect or not? I know it's outside your planning area, but you've indicated that there's no connection across the railroad tracks in that area, but I believe there is, isn't there?
There is a planned connection. I do not personally know if it connects already, and I don't know if any other staff knows.
Okay, well, recognizing that it's outside your plan area, but if there is one there, I would show it. And if you're showing the bike network in that area, even though it's technically outside your plan area, I would definitely argue for showing a crossing of the railroad tracks, be it aspirational or not. It's a very easy physical crossing and needs to be there.
Colin, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to note that at the moment, City View does not cross the railroad tracks, but there are plans to extend that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin.
Anything else, Commissioner Fernandez?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I would just like to dovetail on some of Commissioner Fernandez's concerns, but related to East Washington. We talk about the Imagination Center and Randall Park, but crossing that area, and also there's a very large residential area to the north, and really the bulk of the commercial area is south of East Washington. So more of a robust pedestrian bicycle crossings of East Washington. Can you talk about that? But that's a concern I have, and I think that I drive out to that area a lot because I go to the health club out there. So, but East Washington, being a 6-lane or 8-lane highway, it's pretty daunting for a pedestrian crossing it.
It is, and as our BRT facilities go in, those BRT riders will have to cross at least once a day, right? Depending upon where they get on and where they get off. Because if they're going east and coming home west, or the opposite, right? They will have to cross that. So that is one of the recommendations that we've talked about, improving those crossings as part of that kind of a larger East Washington study. We know that there are plans to improve the crossing and the lights at Independence right here. And we've also talked about a future, like looking at a separated crossing, especially with Rindall there. And I don't know if Linda's still on the call, if she was the one that really talked to traffic engineering about that idea. I don't know if she's still.
Linda is still on the call.
Sure.
Linda, do you want to comment about that?
Sorry. Yes, I can comment. And yes, our traffic traffic engineering department is very interested in exploring that possibility, whether it's at grade or an overpass over East Washington. That is of interest, and that did come through when we spoke with the Alder Halverson for this area. He was very interested in having it, so that is in the plan to have that added.
Thank you, Linda.
Great. Thank you very much.
Is that all of your questions?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank
Chair.
you. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you could bring up the land use map.
Of course.
Thank you. I have a question around Starkweather Creek. So it looks like for the majority of it at the south, we have kind of a buffer around it with the parks and open space, with the exception of that section in the middle, just north of the roundabout, showing general commercial and medium residential. I was just wondering, if there's a reason there wasn't any sort of green buffer, or if that will be considered in the future. I can just see, someone potentially coming forward with a proposal in the future, and there being concerns from members of the public about proximity to the creek there.
Indeed. So one of the issues kind of around here is we needed to be careful about showing a taking of land. So going from what was general commercial or employment uses would, changing that could be considered a taking. So we wanted to be a little careful of that. We have shown, and let me find it on our parks and open space map. We've talked about, there we go. I'm just going to make this a little bigger just for our purposes here. We've talked about kind of keeping that 200-foot buffer around the creek. We think that that's a really key part of maintaining, some distance away from that creek. And if I switch to this, we're really noticing that we think that this area should really be a potential stormwater site. We really think that one of these three areas really should be a community park. So as we work with our friends in the Parks Division, we're talking about, are there possibilities to acquire the one or more of these lands to become a park? And so that's why we have shown this overlay to, kind of mark our intention that we're looking at wanting to protect these areas, and that's an important part of this plan. So we had to be a little careful, but it's a disconnect sometimes, and it's hard to kind of show that without putting all of these maps kind of in context, if that helps.
Yes, I see that now. Thank you so much, Rebecca. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Are there further questions of staff? Further questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I will recommend that the Planning Commission return to Common Council with a recommendation for approval of the adoption of the Greater Easttown Area Plan as a supplement to the comprehensive plan with the recommended changes with the transportation policy and the planning board.
Great. Okay. Is there a second, please? Seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Just briefly, I think this is an excellent plan. And obviously, just like we know that Westtown is redeveloped, and we just approved a plan for Westtown area. Easttown is also a prime for redevelopment in the future as well. And I think that staff has done an excellent job in planning for this area with new street connections, land uses, incorporating housing and parks and open space. And I think that this will be a good guide for the Planning Commission and the city in the future. So thank you very much, staff, for your excellent work.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. I would just second that. I think it's a really good plan. Are there other comments, discussion? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Rebecca, for the presentation.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. Okay, moving on. Next on the agenda are agenda items 8 and 9, and those will be considered together. Legistar 69274 and Legistar 68696. Creating sections of the Madison General Ordinance to change the zoning of property located at 4000 to 4150 Packers Avenue and 4201 North Sherman Avenue, 12th Alder District, from temporary agricultural district to traditional residential consistent 3 district, and to change the zoning of the property located at 4000 through 4150 Packers Avenue and 4201 North Sherman Avenue, from temporary agriculture to traditional residential varied, and changing the zoning of property located at 4000 through 4150 Packers and 4201 North Sherman Avenue in the 12th Alder District from temporary agriculture to traditional residential urban 1 district, and to change the zoning of property located at 4000 through 4150 Packers and 4201 North Sherman Avenue from temporary agricultural district to commercial corridor transitional district, and to change the zoning of property located at 4000 to 4150 Packers and 4201 North Sherman Avenue from temporary agricultural district to conservancy district. Also to approve the preliminary plat of Ramish Farm Development on property addressed as 4000 through 4150 Packers Avenue and 4201 North Sherman Avenue, 18th Alder District. Okay, first we will have a staff presentation by Colin Punt. Colin.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. As Chair Zellers noted, before the Commission now is the Ramish Farm Development Subdivision with a preliminary plat and a number of rezonings. I won't go through every single one of those again, as she just read them off. I will note, however, that there was an error in the agenda for the rezonings, which indicated this was in the 12th Aldermanic District. This area was one of the areas that moved districts on January 1. So this is now the 18th Aldermanic District. This was reflected correctly in the agenda item for the preliminary plat, but not for the zoning. So I just wanted to clarify with that. There has been a very considerable amount of history with this proposal. Discussions with the city began in October 2019. There was a previous proposal for a plat and zoning map amendment that was considered by the Plan Commission in April of 2020. The Plan Commission found that the standards for zoning map amendments regarding public health, safety, and welfare were not met and placed the proposal on file without prejudice. A second proposal for the plat and zoning amendment reflecting changes to the first proposal was considered by the Plan Commission in July of 2021. The Plan Commission did find the standards met, recommended approval to the Common Council. In August of 2021, the Common Council voted not to adopt the zoning map amendment or the resolution approving the plat, citing concerns regarding the potential for excessive noise from F-35s, which are planned to be stationed at nearby Truax Field. A Common Council President's Environmental Justice Work Group was convened shortly thereafter to study the noise issue, as well as water quality issues and concerns on the north side. The work group has not submitted a formal report or recommendations, and most members chose not to pursue formal policy to limit or prohibit existing or planned residential uses in the area at this time. So staff does believe that with the recommended conditions of approval for this plat and rezoning request, which are materially identical to the one most recently proposed, the proposal is generally consistent with the land use and street layout recommendations for the site in the comprehensive plan and neighborhood plan. Staff also believe the rezoning request is consistent with the zoning map amendment standards of approval. I will also note that during discussions with the applicant, they have indicated to staff that they are amenable to considering the inclusion of urban agricultural activities, either with community garden plots in cooperation with the Parks Division and its community partners, or potentially down the line with another community organization on a larger scale. Pursuing something along the latter, larger scale would require replatting, most likely, and rezoning to the affected areas for urban agriculture purposes. If this were to move forward, a replat and a rezoning would likely be determined to also be consistent with the recommended adopted plans. Finally, as one more point of clarification for the commission, the state subdivision statute requires that a preliminary plat be approved, conditionally approved, or rejected within 90 days of submittal, unless the time is extended by agreement with the applicant. If no action is taken by the Common Council within that 90 days and no extension is granted, the plat is deemed approved. For this preliminary plat application, the 90-day review period for this plat will expire on February 27. Assuming the commission takes action tonight, the preliminary plat is on the schedule to go before Common Council for its February 22 meeting. That's what I have for you right now, and I am more than happy to answer questions when the time comes.
Thank you, Colin. And we do have registrants. I will open the public hearing. We will first hear from registrant Joel Oliver from St. Louis, Missouri, in support, wishing to speak, representing Green Street Development. Joel, you have 3 minutes.
And I believe you have my presentation also. Perfect. And is my microphone working okay?
Yes.
Well, everybody, we are very happy to be here again in front of you to discuss what we're hoping to do on Ramish Farm projects. It is correct that Green Street is based out of St. Louis, Missouri. And this would be our second project in Wisconsin. As Colin said, what we're presenting tonight is materially the same as what we presented last year. Unfortunately, we're playing a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole with certain constituents, but we're happy to do that because it's what we do as real estate developers, and we really view ourselves as being a partner with not only cities but with communities where our projects are. So I want to very quickly run through where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. So if you could go to the next slide. So unfortunately, tonight, I think you'll hear two really resounding themes, and that's that everybody's rushing to try to get this project done. The reality is we started looking at the site over 3 years ago. A previous developer shepherded the annexation from Burke, really because Madison wanted economic development to be done on this site. So we've engaged in many meetings with many stakeholders listed here, made quite a few changes to our plans, we believe that we've gone above and beyond what really is even standard for developers, but we pride ourselves in really respecting that relationship. So if we can go to the next slide. Some of the key things that we have heard in our process were that the community wanted a variety of housing options. So we made smaller lots to make the single family homes more in keeping with the neighborhood. If we can go to the next slide. We heard that people wanted, the townhouse use to be located differently throughout the site. So we moved it to where it's currently shown. If we can go to the next slide. We took it upon ourselves to pull all of the residential outside of the 65 decibel line. There's been a lot of consternation on if this line is true or not. I think it's the best information that anybody has. It was prepared by the federal government. So we imposed on ourselves to not build any housing in this area, which the city and the presidential council found to be fitting and did not ask us to make any additional changes after the committee met. If we can go to the next one. The outdoor forest school that the Lakeview has is very important to them, and there were some minor efforts to preserve that. We're actually in the position to deed 3.5 acres or 5% of the site to the park department for the use of the community. We're keeping to the next slide. And then we are working with Groundswell, which is a local nonprofit, and are in negotiations with them now to preserve a very significant portion of the site. I'm almost out of time here, so we can elaborate more on that, but we heard that from the community. We're in those negotiations, and the city has been privy to those conversations. So we're happy to answer any questions that come up later also.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will next hear from Marcia Cannon, Cherokee Circle, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Marcia, you have 3 minutes. Could we get Marcia unmuted?
Yep. Marcia, you should see a prompt to unmute yourself. It may be behind a window. But there should be a prompt asking you to unmute.
Yes, I would. Thank
you. Okay, Marcia, you have 3 minutes.
Sorry. My name is Marcia Cannon. I live just off North Sherman Avenue, about 4 blocks north of Ramish Farm. As you consider the proposed zoning and plat this evening, please consider these questions. 1, what's the rush to rezone Ramish Farm? Number 2, what does the community lose if we wait on zoning? 3, what unintended consequences arise from this proposed plat? Doing nothing leaves the property zoned for agriculture. If you recommend rezoning for housing, how will you account for unintended consequences after the F-35s arrive? What happens when noise extends beyond the guesstimated 65 decibel contour line? What happens to people who rent or buy newly constructed dwellings? What happens to a business disrupted by excess noise? There's something not right about this proposal. There have been 4 public meetings. The plan has been turned down, tweaked, and turned down again by city officials. Yet, here it is once more. A wait on rezoning before you opens the door to urban farming, a community benefit that can easily coexist with F-35s. Please do not recommend rezoning at this time. Either turn down this proposal or refer it to a future meeting. Ramish Farm could benefit many North Siders, and you'll hear about the benefits that are possible if you allow all parties the time to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. The next registrant is Richard Joseph, Winooski, Vermont, opposed and wishing to speak. Richard Joseph, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Richard Joseph. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. So I live in Winooski, Vermont. I live approximately 200 yards outside the line defining the F-35-65 DBD&L noise zone. And I'd like to share my experiences of 2 years here with you. I can report that being 200 yards outside the zone makes no discernible difference in harmful impacts. Extreme noise raining down on you from a jet 1,000 feet overhead does not suddenly diminish at a line drawn by a computer model. These computer-generated lines serve a purpose, but common sense should also come into play regarding decisions affecting people's lives. For example, if I happen to be so unfortunate as to be outside my house without hearing protection when the planes fly over, the noise exceeds the pain threshold. The noise has a violent and abusive character. Ringing in the ears lasts for hours afterwards. Even with high-quality hearing protection, indoors or out, you get an uncomfortable feeling of vibration or pressure in the chest and abdomen from the low-frequency sound waves. Long-term exposure to this shocking noise has very serious negative health effects well described in the scientific literature. One cannot live a normal life here. You have to plan your days so as to maximize it, so as to minimize exposure as much as possible, keeping hearing protection close by. This is made more difficult because the schedule and path of flights varies without notification. The noise makes conversation in person or over the phone impossible. Family life and all activities that require concentration are interrupted. Prior to the basing, the promise of mitigation was aggressively promoted here in Vermont as a way to assuage citizen concerns. Then, after the arrival of the jets, the authorities announced that it would take 25 years to implement their mitigation plan. But the real problem with mitigation is not delayed implementation. The problem is that it doesn't work. The FAA plainly and correctly states that the only mitigation that works is to tear down houses and relocate residents. It should be obvious that soundproofing is useless if you are outside or inside with windows open. Even with windows closed, soundproofing does nothing to stop damaging low-frequency sound. So based on my experience here, I strongly urge the council to reject any plan to build housing in the vicinity of the F-35 noise zone. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Richard, for your comments. Our next registrant is Terry Bell, Nishinshin Trail, Monona, support and wishing to speak. Terry, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Terry Bell. I'm a residential and I'm a commercial real estate agent in this area. I have been working with Bruce Ramish on this development and also Green Street on this exciting project. After years of trying to find the right fit for this 60-acre property, it's clear that Green Street development is just that. Not only have they been willing to listen to the city, but also the community. They've offered a variety of different housing options, like smaller lots to remain consistent with the surrounding neighborhoods, apartments that utilize a workforce housing model at market rates, and an area for townhomes or duplexes, creating a much needed mix of housing for this area. They're also planning commercial along Packers Ave that will add amenities to the region and the development. The residential will be built outside of the 65 decibel zone and will utilize noise mitigation measures. They're preserving the school forest and expanding it by 3 acres, giving up valuable development land. They've also added green space served in the area that will be privately maintained. This is a wonderful project for this area. It is in line with the neighborhood and land use plan and will supply much needed housing in these low inventory times. I fully support this project. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Our next registrant is Michelle Lindley, Hanover Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Michelle, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, first of all, to Green Street. Thank you for the work that you've done in making things so making this the best it can be under the circumstances. I'm Michelle Ellinger-Lindley. I'm a member of the Ramish Farm Work Group. We started meeting in 2020, and we've been meeting pretty much weekly since then. I mean, this is something that we've lived and breathed for 18 months, almost 2 years now. And more importantly, I'm a resident of the North Side for 17 years. I'm a homeowner. I'm a constituent in District 18. And I deeply care about this. This proposal is kind of a mess. And it's come before us multiple times now. It was just at Common Council in August. The rejection of that was 15-2. I mean, it's a pretty clear message. And nothing's different about this application. It's the same one. We can't ignore the reasons that it was rejected the first time. My concerns about the F-35s are shared by many. I know that folks are speaking about that tonight. That's unchanged as well. And then there's also the fact that once you change something from agriculture zoning to residential and other uses, it's really hard to go back and rezone that. It has to be done manually, and it's very tedious. But also there's a glaring issue here. This process really has not been followed correctly in a couple of ways. First, as Colin Punt mentioned earlier, planning staff, the agenda for tonight lists item 8 under District 12, item 9 under District 18. I'm not clear if this was a clerical error or what, but for that reason, this was not added to Alder Miazzi's blog to inform constituents of tonight's meeting. So some folks missed out on that. It curiously though it did contain stuff about the Easttown plan, which isn't even in District 18. But in addition to that, a meeting with the developer was held on January 11th, in which our alder spoke of holding a second meeting. That meeting did not happen. And then afterward, the link to that January 11th meeting with the developer, which had a lot of opposition, was not shared to Alder Miazzi's blog until February 1st. So 3 weeks after the public meeting and 6 days before this meeting. I actually had to go to planning staff myself and ask for that video because our work group wanted to rewatch it. So this is not the process of democracy, which is supposed to be public and transparent. We began meeting shortly after the last Common Council meeting with lots of possibilities. I'm really glad to hear that there's talks about things like urban agriculture that are so important. And yes, we have great things that are happening here, but I am tired. I'm asking you to please put on file or refer so that we have some time to appropriately talk with our alder and make some more of these decisions instead of just rushing it. I do agree that we've had a lot of time to talk about it, but a lot of that time has been folks talking in opposition and adding to things. If it's certain constituents that want things, well, I'm happy to be one of them. Our work group did some amazing work with lots of folks in our community to make sure that this plat was done right. And we're not going to stop until it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. The next registrant is Mark Voss, Mayfield Lane, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Mark, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I asked to speak to urge you to refer the review of the Ramish Farm plat to a future meeting to allow revision to include space for urban agriculture and to account for the impact of F-35 aircraft on planned housing. Approving this plat before you now is akin to a ready, fire, aim, due diligence approach. There needs to be more time allotted to define the target and aim properly before firing and approving this plat. There are many issues left to resolve for thoughtful consideration of this large parcel that is heavy with possible negative externalities, but also pregnant with potential for a win-win for the neighborhood and the developer. This 60-plus acre parcel has been an anchor of agriculture in the city. We must preserve a significant portion of this agricultural space and elevate it to food for people grown by sustainable urban growers, including the BIPOC community, farmers, community gardeners, and educational horticultural programming. This is in keeping with the neighborhood plan. Including acreage for sustainable entrepreneurial farming in this plat will be an effort in the direction of mitigating the impact the built environment of this development will have on the landscape in particular and on the planet. There is a win-win possible that will allow for commercial development on a portion of the parcel and for sustainable human-scale farming on another portion. There are resources and players interested in making this happen. But this win-win needs time to be arrived at from the current plat, where no acreage is slated to remain in agricultural zoning. Please lead in the direction of what is best for the people of this city and for the planet. Land access for sustainable farming, education, food security, resilience, and equity. Please refer this plat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Our next registrant is Jean Zilva from Winooski, Vermont, neither support nor opposed and wishing to speak. Jean, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Jean Silva. I'm a retired family practice physician and assistant professor emerita at the Larner School of Medicine in Burlington, Vermont, where I taught gross anatomy and neuroscience. I live in Winooski and have been exposed to the F-35s for almost 2.5 years now. I would like to share my personal experiences as well as my knowledge, hoping that it will help you make this decision. I live right on the edge of the 65 decibel contour, and I routinely clock 108 decibels on my phone from my back deck. I've recorded as high as 113 at a Winooski Park. Some of my neighbors have moved. One couple said it was to protect their baby. Another said that they moved to Vermont to work remotely. The F-35s made that impossible. My spouse is working from home during the COVID pandemic. Even in the winter with the windows closed, the noise is highly disruptive. You can't do Zoom meetings. We don't have air conditioning, but hey, it's Vermont. Who needs air conditioning? And the few months we have with open windows, the F-35s make concentrating on anything or communicating with anyone impossible. The noise from the F-35s will harm people in several ways. One important way, and often neglected, is that noise of this level will activate the universal stress response. This causes stress hormones to be elevated, such as cortisol and adrenaline. Chronic arousal of the universal stress response causes premature vascular disease, increasing the risk of myocardial infarction and stroke. If you're slated to have dementia, you'll get it sooner around this kind of noise. Your conscious brain may think you are not stressed by it, but your reptilian brain knows better. People say, "What stress? 65 decibels, it's a vacuum cleaner." Get real. Real is that the 65 decibel level is an average. Imagine if you had a noisy vacuum going 24/7. I think you'd be stressed. Effects of chronic stress not only affect the person being stressed, but can be passed down through generations by a process called epigenetics. Your stress can affect your future children. Noise like this harms children more so than adults. There was an elegant study in Germany when Munich decided to move its airport. Cognitive testing was done on children where the airport was before the move and in the area where the airport was going to be. The children around the airport were not doing as well in reading, memory, speech perception. After the airport moved, the kids were tested again, and the results were flipped. Cognitive decline followed the airport. And this is with commercial jets, not military planes. Time prevents me from speaking about hearing, but note this. Babies and small children have shorter, straighter ear canals, resulting in them hearing the same noise as an adult, but it can sound 20 decibels louder. Remember that 108 on my deck? It would sound like 128 to a top, well over what it takes for a single exposure to damage hearing. Would you want your child exposed to that?
Thank you, Jean. That concludes your available time. Thank you very much for speaking with us. The next registrant is Beth Sluice on Nova Way, Madison, Wisconsin, opposed and wishing to speak. Beth, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Liddell. Good evening, everyone. I really just am here this evening for two purposes. One is to thank Green Street for all the work and for listening and hearing us. throughout the process. However, I do believe that the Common Council vote of 15-2 was purely a vote of conscience. To vote to allow housing development knowingly that the F-35s are coming and the impact of that on people's lives feels to me an act that is almost immoral. We have housing there we're going to have to deal with on a large scale. In the areas around the Burlington Airport right now that was slated for housing, that housing is not being allowed. That land is being rezoned to not allow housing. And I think that given the testimony we've heard this evening from people that are living it, we are Winooski. This is us in next year, 2023, the jets are coming. So I'm asking this board, this council, this commission to please reconsider this as a referral until we actually know what we're looking at when the F-35 comes next year, less than a year probably, so that we can really understand how the sound is moving and what would be the best use of this property. I feel like the wisdom of the council was to say no, and I think that we need to respect that, understand the impact of the jets, and then make decisions accordingly for the health and the benefit and the safety of our community. This side of Madison has a long history of redlining, and I'm hoping that's not what we're seeing as decisions are being made. And we need to really regard environmental justice as we move forward and not put people in harm's way. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. The next registrant is David Biermann, Nova Way, Madison, Wisconsin, opposed, wishing to speak. David, you have 3 minutes.
David, if you can't, you are unmuted as far as us. You have to hit *6 if you're on the phone. It's *6 on your phone. There you go.
Hello?
Yep.
Yes, okay, we can hear you now. 3 minutes.
Good evening. Approving the proposed zoning and plat for this area is premature, and this initiative should be denied due to the yet undetermined impacts to health and human safety that will be imparted by the future deployment of the F-35s and continued overflights of the existing F-16s. Only after the F-35s are flying will it be possible to know the true extent of the sound impacts and how these impacts can be mitigated for public safety. Anything less is a guess, and a wrong guess will result in the endangerment of those inhabiting the homes and businesses envisioned by this initiative. Part of this land parcel is within the model but not proven 65 decibel zone by the Air National Guard's environmental impact statement. Actual field measurements made in other communities where F-35s are already flying have determined the modeled 65 dB zone extent was grossly underestimated, with sound levels far exceeding and extending outside the original model zone, exposing literally hundreds of additional residents to sound levels incompatible for human habitation by the Air Force's own definition. It is a fact that F-35s produce sound levels 4 to 6 times louder than F-16s. Planning staff testified in the recent past that the city has conducted no sound level tests in regard to current overflights of F-16s. Private engineering testing of F-16 overflights of this parcel have found them to exceed 120 decibels. Fact-based science dictates much higher sound levels will be suffered than we are currently experiencing, extending and negatively impacting a much larger public domain. Assurances have been made that measures will be taken in development in this area utilizing construction methods to mitigate F-35 sound levels, often suggesting HUD standards. This is an absolutely false representation of fact, as the level of sound above 65 decibels are federal agency considered to be incompatible for human habitation and not mitigatable. It is not ethical, just planning, nor responsible government, nor is it in the best interest of public safety to allow the platting and development of this parcel to continue for residential and commercial use until the actual sound measurements from the F-35s can be made and all risks to human health, especially those most vulnerable, the marginalized, low and middle income families and businesses that are projected for this area, are known. Plan Commission denial of this initiative and delaying further action on development of the F-35 zones is sound public government. Our citizens are looking to you to make good, sound, science-based decisions. It is a correct path to wait until the F-35s are here and actual noise levels can be determined. Deny proposed zoning and plat for the protection of those that could be harmed by this initiative until all the facts are understood. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have some registrants who are available to answer questions. The next two I will read are in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Anita Weir, Gulf Parkway, Madison, and James Kirsten, Autumn Leaf Lane, Madison. Again, available to answer questions, both in support. And then the following registrants are opposed and available to answer questions, but not wishing to speak. Marion Selesnik, Sheridan Drive, Madison, David Pelosa, Pond Street, Madison, Joan Bell Call, Esh Lane, Madison, and she represents Next Door Environmental Nature Wildlife Group. Lori Getter, Delaware Boulevard, Madison. Shana Tesh, Marquette Street, Madison. And those are the registrants not wishing to speak and opposed. Heather.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. I think there were two later additions. I just want to make sure. I see Emily Kraus and Daniel Ward.
Okay.
Would you like for me to read those?
Would you please? I don't see those on mine. Go ahead.
Emily Kraus of Pond Street in Madison, opposed and wishing to speak.
Okay. Emily Kraus, you have 3 minutes.
Emily, you should be seeing a prompt to unmute yourself, maybe behind your Zoom window on your screen, but there should be a prompt to unmute. Emily, you are not unmuted in Zoom. There should be a prompt somewhere on your screen to unmute yourself so you can speak. Chair, why don't we come back to Emily? And
do we have another person wishing to speak, Heather?
Yes, one more. Daniel Ward of Midmore Road in Monona. Support, wishing to speak.
Okay, Daniel, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I just want to make a couple points. So I'm a commercial real estate broker in Madison. I'm speaking as a private citizen tonight, but I've been following this project and working with Green Street. And I'd like to point out a couple things that I think have been borne by some of the comments from the opposition. Number one, that Green Street as a developer has, in my opinion, bent over backward to be accommodating to both their dealings with the city as well as the Ramish Farm Working Group, the community meetings that they've had. And I think that that deserves to be recognized. Secondly, it occurs to me, and this has happened at some of the other meetings that we've had, that there are far more people in favor of this project than meets the eye. And I think it's important to note that most general residents are only going to call into meetings like this one tonight when they oppose a project. And admittedly, it's hard to get people to call in when they're in favor of a project. But as city leaders, I think that is worth noting, that it might seem very lopsided, the people who are calling in mostly being in opposition. But there are far more people in favor of this. And the proof of that is an article that was written in, I think, Madison.com or the Wisconsin State Journal, where the online comments were much closer to sort of 50-50 in favor versus being opposed to this project. The second thing that I cannot stress enough, and that is that this project and this plan provide real solutions to real problems with regard to the housing market in Madison. Madison has a major affordable housing shortage, both in apartment stock as well as the difficulty residents face trying to get a foothold in actual home ownership. This developer has made adjustments to lot sizes to make the ability to own a single family home much more affordable, and adding this supply of both the workforce housing apartment stock as well as the single family housing component will go a very long way to addressing a major problem in Madison. I'm in commercial real estate. I deal with multifamily housing. The majority of multifamily housing we see are sort of high-end $2,000 a month, one-bedroom apartments for kids going to school at UW, and there's just not enough.
Thank you very much, Daniel. That concludes your available time.
Chair?
Yes.
We also have an additional person that registered opposing, wishing to speak. Wayne Johnson of District 12.
Okay, let's try for Wayne. Wayne, you have 3 minutes.
Me. Can you hear me?
That
Yes.
was 18. Correction, District 18.
District 18. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad I could speak. I'd just like to reiterate, I live in the Whitetail Ridge neighborhood, and I understand there are some people outside the community that may be in favor of this, but I truly oppose this. I think it's an injustice to the east side of Madison with the F-35s, as others have stated, from Winooski, Vermont. And obviously when this came up to bring the F-35s, there wasn't a lot of discussion, I believe, in the noise level and the harmfulness that F-35s bring to our community. And I don't think anybody on this knows that impact yet. So therefore, I don't think we should move forward as far as pushing this through and getting it approved to actually zone it for housing. Injustice to low income who don't have the same capacity to move further out of the city. And by bringing these F-35s here, the property values, which we don't know is going to happen, to the property values of this east side with those F-35s here, if these become inhabitable, or it reduces the value of properties in the neighborhood. So I truly agree with all the people that oppose this. I think it was very clear when it first came through, 15-2 vote, voting this down, that we should do nothing with this piece of property until we know the impact of the F-35s on this side of the north side community and what that is. I think that's an injustice to the community. I think it's an injustice to the people that would move in these and have that harmful impact. I think all those people on Winooski who have felt it, who have dealt with it firsthand, have the best knowledge of what that does to a community. And so therefore, I strongly oppose this. I hope it is morally in the best of the committee to not allow this and not red tape this and push this through. Obviously, the developer of this is not in Madison. They're in St. Louis. They're not living in the community. They want to develop. They would probably do a great job, but they've not talked to the Whitetail neighborhood or approached the Whitetail neighborhood or had listening sessions with the Whitetail neighborhood, such as they did when Cherokee was going to be developed. There was Warner Park had several listening sessions with the north side and was very involved. Dennis Tiziani was very involved with this side. He has Cherokee Country Club here. He has his home here in Cherokee. He's very involved with the north side and willing to listen to the constituents, and nothing got moved forward in the development of Cherokee because he listened to the north side people and what they had to say. So that's my summary. I strongly oppose it on behalf of Dennis Tiziani, on behalf of Steve Stricker, and all those on the north side. Thank you.
Wayne. Do we have the other registrant able to connect now? Emily Kraus, you have 3 minutes.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Planning Commission members. My name is Emily Kraus, and my husband and I and our 2 children live in the Whitetail Ridge neighborhood, which abuts the proposed Ramish Farm development. As many other constituents have shared, we have multiple serious concerns regarding this proposed development, 2 of the most important being the aircraft noise and the lack of road infrastructure to support additional commercial and residential units in this area. Living so close to the jets has been extremely detrimental to our 2 small children's development. The already horrendously loud F-16s shake our house. This is within our house with windows shut, just outside of the 65 decibel and prior to F-35 arrival. Our young son sometimes cries and holds his ears saying he wants the noise to stop. The sound from the jets trips the children's baby monitors to the highest level, akin to someone shouting in their bedrooms. It frequently wakes them from naps and has cost them countless hours of sleep. It's clearly harmful to their sleep, hearing, and general growth and development. Please do not put other families in this position and endanger their health and safety. In addition, County Highway CV is in horrendous condition, and the high volume of traffic on this small 2-lane county highway already poses significant safety concerns to commuters entering and exiting from Whitetail Ridge, as well as all along the stretch of road where the proposed development would be located. Adding hundreds of additional housing and commercial units will further increase this danger. Importantly, Dane County has no plans to redesign or expand Highway CB in the foreseeable future, per previous reports. There has been no discussion regarding even the possibility of road expansion, which may not even be feasible due to the proximity to Dane County Airport and FAA regulations. There's been no discussion of traffic assessment. This is putting the cart before the horse. This development cannot proceed without the appropriate road infrastructure in place prior to any development. Without this, a vote of approval is a vote to endanger our lives. Thank you for listening, and please do not support this proposal.
Thank you for joining us, Emily. Any other registrants, Heather or Jesse? No. Okay. Then I would ask if any of the commissioners have questions of any of our registrants. Alder Heck.
Thank you. I have a question for Michelle Lindley, if she's still here. It looks like she is.
I am still here.
Okay.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Michelle. I just want to understand. I understand the timeline of your recent engagement process, and I'm hoping you can fill in a couple of gaps for me. I heard loudly from you and other participants that you did thank the applicants for their working with you, but you're kind of at loggerheads about the results of that, obviously. But can you just give me a brief timeline of what's happened since the Plan Commission and Council's earlier determination this past summer, and I also am interested in knowing how you feel about a referral that I've heard several people mention, and what you anticipate would happen between now and a referral if you had your in a future consideration if you had your way.
Sure. Thanks so much for asking that question. And also, I would say that Marcia Cannon, who's also on this call, would be a really great person to answer that as well. So either one of us would be fine. So the Ramish Farm Work Group, after the August 3rd decision by Common Council, the 15-2, got that kind of reconvened with a bunch of folks. The Regional Agriculture and Food Sovereignty Group, and some folks from a couple of different land banking, and people, from urban agriculture organizations. And we just had these really great, rich conversations about what that piece of land could look like. And we were sort of a little bit blindsided by when the application was resubmitted again, as the thing in November. So, we started talking again pretty much right away afterward. I think we had a meeting in September, and we've been meeting since then. So we were made aware of the application being resubmitted, I think sometime in mid-November. What the second part of your question is, what would happen if we did refer? There are some of those conversations happening, and I know Green Street is engaging in those conversations, and which is fantastic. It's just that some of these things need some time to be worked out. And those conversations I'm referring to are for urban agriculture. There's one group in particular that has 2 other urban farms in the area, and they're eyeing this piece as a perfect piece of land because it's not developed yet, And when you have a piece of ag land, it's you can't put it back into ag once it's developed, So it's a perfect piece of land for them. So really the thought here is, getting our alder up to speed as well. We need to do that. We haven't really had the opportunity to do that yet. But to facilitate some of those conversations that clearly need to happen around this, instead of zoning it and then making those decisions, to make those decisions as a part of the rezone, if that makes sense. So does that answer your question?
Sure. Just one follow-up question. I guess since August, has Green Street been involved in these conversations with your working group, or has it mostly been you all brainstorming, intergroup brainstorming?
Green Street has been involved in some of the conversations with the organization I was speaking about. They have not been in conversations with our work group at this point.
I see. Okay. And I guess.
And yes, they have done a fantastic job. I just want to say that again.
Okay, thanks. Just one other quick question. What would you think if a portion of the land were to remain ag, but not all of it? So that there was some opportunity for a more collaborative effort, yet there were, some of the housing components were still possible on other portions of the land.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking that. Actually, that's one of the things that we've considered and talked about in some of those big group brainstorms is what would happen if maybe the western third was, because there's already a wetland there's already the Lakeview School Forest. What if the rest of that remaining land was farmable, and it could be urban agriculture, it could be small plot, little plat farms for folks that are, it could be part of the food corridor of the north side. That would be really cool if that could happen. And the likelihood of those single family homes being contracted out to a builder, that's likely what's going to happen from my understanding, but maybe someone from Green Street can chime in on that. But they're really, what Green Street has done is apartments. So I feel like maybe if they got their apartments and the community got some of that urban ag land, that might be a really nice solution to this. But again, that takes some time, and as it stands, what we have in front of us right now, that's not what it looks like.
Okay, thanks much for your input. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I know that's always in doubt. This is a question probably for either Mark Voss or Michelle Lindley. And Mark specifically said that there are resources and players involved in the urban agriculture. It'd be my assumption that, it's not within our Plan Commission's authority to take some of this land and make it urban agriculture. Someone would have to purchase it. Are there groups involved right now who are capable of or exploring possibilities for actually acquiring some of this land? In other words, if we delay this, is it going to look any different in terms of someone acquiring the land, or is the hope only that somehow that land will be dedicated or deeded for this purpose. And my other question is, why would the land be more appropriate for urban agriculture given the health impacts of the F-35s? And I'm extremely sympathetic to that concern. Obviously, we don't have any ability to stop the F-35s. If I could, I would instantly. That's not within our ability to decide. But why is urban agriculture an appropriate use for an area that is, potentially hazardous to people's health?
Mark Voss?
Yes, thank you for the question, Commissioner. The Green Street alluded to the fact that they were in discussions right now with some land trusts that are operating other farms in the area, and that those discussions continue. And so I'm imploring more time to allow those discussions to come to fruition, so that the plat that comes before the Planning Commission will reflect those discussions arriving at a solution. I would defer to Green Street if they want to talk about who they're in discussions with. But my understanding is that those groups that are in discussion right now do have resources and are working on finding a way to acquire a portion of that land were it to be made available. Regarding the question of suitability for farming versus suitability for housing, that is a very, very good question. Farmers who would be on the land there would obviously have to have ear protection, and I've heard some testimony from the folks from Vermont that there are not schedules that are held to, but it would be my hope that there would be a schedule that could be adhered to, and people would know when those jets are taking off. The difference, I suppose, is that people who are farming are not there 24/7, and that land would not be land that would be owned by those people. It would be owned by the land trust organization and made available to farmers on some sort of a lease basis. And their wealth would not be, and their future wealth would not be tied up in that, whereas housing would be. Those are a few of my thoughts. And I realize that there are still open questions there.
Did you have any follow-ups, Commissioner Fernandez?
So thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any additional questions, Commissioner? No, okay. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I have a question for the developer.
Okay, Joel Oliver?
Yes.
Unmuted.
Okay.
Hi, Joel. I had a question. So regarding the sound attenuation, so there is that note 3 on the plat referring to, that any residential within the projected 65 decibel area will utilize HUD guidance on sound attenuation construction methods. My question is, how would that be monitored or enforced going forward beyond having that note on the plat?
Yep, that's a good question. So the way we would envision that working is that obviously the city of Madison has to review all of the drawings before they'll issue a permit. Actually, in Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin reviews those before they get to the city. The HUD guidelines are pretty clear in what they require, and so that the city staff would verify that those elements were in place before they would issue a construction permit to us.
Okay, so that would be triggered by plan review by looking against the plat. One other question related to that, the projected 65 decibel area may change, maybe not in the near future. So I guess would the sound attenuation that's mentioned in the plat kind of extend to a new area if it were to change, in a year or two or beyond that?
That's an interesting legal question.
Yeah.
So I would think legally what those plat notes obligate us to is what is on the eastern side of the site. Those measures that are put in place are during construction. So at the end of the day, the economic liability for this entire project is on us. And our desire as responsible developers is to produce something that obviously the community wants. If we have apartments that people won't rent or homes that people won't buy, that's bad for us. So our intention would be to address all of those issues, regardless of what's on the plat, to have the most desirable product that's really an asset to the community.
Okay. Yeah, and I can raise that question with staff as well. I know that they suggested some additional language to that note in the comments, so there may be some additional clarity to add there. That's all I have for questions right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Alder Heck.
Thank you again for allowing me to ask Mr. Oliver a question or two. I guess I'm, related to what I was asking Michelle Lindley and trying to understand the work that you've done with the work group and other stakeholders. And what's your reaction to the possibility of taking a little bit longer to work out some sort of dedicated ag land in your plat rather than moving forward with this particular version? And from my perspective, I'm not asking about the entire farm to be left as ag, but some portion of it dedicated to this more community-oriented use.
Sure, that's a good question. What I would say is it's unfortunately a complicated question. We have, a gentleman that owns this farm who's in his mid-80s. His desire is to sell the site. The site was commercially available for sale, and another agricultural user did not come along to buy it for that use. Last year we engaged very, very heavily with the Ramish Farm Working Group, and the idea of a land conservancy came up. Unfortunately, in those negotiations, the Ramish Farm Working Group wanted to control those conversations and those negotiations, so we weren't directly privy to them. So that couldn't be directly contemplated last year. When we met with the community earlier before this meeting and with our new Alder, the idea was put forward that Groundswell might be an entity that's interested in doing something on a portion of the site. In our business, the due diligence process is very expensive, right? So what I would say you have in front of you is a developer that is very willing to work with them, or in good faith negotiations with them, that we very intentionally made the Alder privy to, so that he knew exactly transparently what we were talking about. Groundswell's been working with Lakeview, they've been working with the Parks Department to come to an agreement that works. But there is expensive due diligence that they have to do to get to a point where that's an executable plan. So to the extent we have no certainty on what can happen on the site or what can go forward, I don't know how a nonprofit spends resources to do that. Once we know that we have a plan that can go forward, that we're able to execute on, then the onus is on us to support them in their due diligence efforts. And it's on us to go back and replat a portion of the site for their agricultural use, which we've had many conversations with planning and zoning, with the Alder, and with Groundswell on how exactly that works, but it's all documented. So in light of no decision, I don't know what they would do. At some point we lose the ability to develop the site, and some other developer will come along. They will buy the site, and I would having been doing this for 22 years, would all but guarantee you will not have as friendly of somebody who wants to make all of the concessions, that we've made in the effort of being a really good community member and doing what's responsible.
Thanks. Just one quick follow-up question. I appreciate what you're saying, but if we did go ahead with this particular replatting and take you on your word that if a good opportunity comes up, you might reverse course on some portion of this and rezone it back to ag. What if you were to be approached by people that want to buy the property and then do something else, or maybe exactly what it's platted for, but are not interested in doing the ag component? Then it's kind of just there's no guarantee that could happen at all because of the fact that you wouldn't have to follow through, but you also may not be the ones that actually execute the plan when it gets to that point.
No, I think that's a very fair question, and it's unfortunately born out of that people in our industry don't always have a great reputation. What I can tell you is we're a multi-billion-dollar development shop that has the capacity and will be the developers for the entire site. My bigger concern would be if, say, I carved out a portion of the site and said, we're going to keep this agriculture. The only way that works is for very responsible stewardship of that land. At one point we did offer significantly more land to the Parks Department, and they did not want that. So that door was shut. So if you put yourself in my shoes, what I don't do is I don't develop and run farms, and I don't have a desire to do that. So if I keep a portion ag, it'll never be rezoned into something that we could do, but for having a user like Groundswell want to step in and actually do it. We are negotiating a contract with them now to do that. And there's a lot of steps between now and us actually doing anything. We have to go to the Common Council. We have to come back and file a final plat. We have conditional uses. So the reality is, if I turn out just to be a bad developer and a liar, there's a lot of teeth that the city has to make my life very difficult, and that has no benefit to me. We're not playing a game. If I was a heavy-handed developer that had no interest in playing nicely, I never would have made any of the 10 concessions we've already made that have every single one cost us money. But our ethos is not to come and shove a development plan down a city's throat. It's to work with everybody that's around and try to find what works best for everybody. That's why we've had the alders parts in the conversations with Groundswell, so that he had transparency into what we were doing. So it wasn't just, somebody having to take our word on it. So There's an element of faith there, absolutely. But I'd say your bigger concern is if we're being entrusted to take 65 acres in this very important growth corridor and really create some real equity on the north side of Madison, that's a bigger concern than are we willing to set aside a portion for urban agriculture. So we just want to be your partner.
All right. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I have a question for the developer again. What's your phasing plan for this subdivision? Are you going to be subdividing it all and all the streets go in at one time, or are you doing several final plats that will you be bringing forward?
Jesse? Yeah.
Sorry, my clicker wasn't working. Sorry about that. No, that is a good question. It's a very hard question to answer right now, not knowing exactly where the final pieces will fall, to be honest with you. At this point, our desire and the way that we are working from a design and engineering standpoint is in the hopes of having the urban agricultural piece work. So it really becomes more of a means and methods question with our contractor and with our design team. We would envision doing as many of these pieces sequentially in a shorter term that work. We believe that we can come to an agreement with Groundswell very quickly here, depending on the outcome of this evening, and then start making that pivot on the engineering side, which those conversations have logistically already started happening. So I think the short answer is things would happen, relatively quickly sequentially. It's not like it's a 5-year, 5-phased kind of rollout. But I would have to speak with our design and construction folks, to specifically lay out how that would happen. Does that answer your question, or can I answer that differently?
Well, I guess I was wondering if you're going to be proceeding, maybe you have answered it, but proceeding from the west to the east, because you can't develop at least a portion of the eastern area for a while. And so I guess the other question I have, and maybe this will help answer my initial question. In the staff report, they talk about urban agriculture for lots 106, and is that the area that you've talked about reserving or set aside potentially, or negotiating with either the city or the other entities for urban agriculture?
So, let me zoom this in. So, overall site development outside of buildings really comes down to how the overall site works. Obviously there's some topography on the site that requires moving dirt around. So purely from the how does the site work portion work, I'm saying work a lot of times, that's actually hard to say, up in the northeast corner of the site where the stormwater management would go, that is probably one of the first things that you would develop, right? Because as you do site work on the entirety of the site and balance it out, that has to all be functional for the work that comes in. So that's A. B, in the southwest corner, there's 2 lots down there. There's outlot number 4, which is noted as conservation OL4. That is the area that started the conversation with the school to maintain the historic oak trees over there.
Right.
So that blue portion is where we started last year, if you recall.
Right.
Then there were house lots on 106, I believe 14 house lots, that we then said we are willing to also deed all of that area to the Parks Department. So between 106 and Outlot 4, that's roughly the 3.5 acres that the Parks Department is currently in the process of drawing up their agreements to codify that. So that is that piece. The urban agriculture piece for groundswell is not in that footprint. I would tell you that Groundswell does have a working relationship with the school and that they manage some of their land. So Groundswell has met with the school on how they can work together on that portion. But the true urban ag land with Groundswell is outside of that footprint. I'm actually not privy to say where exactly that is, kind of out of respect in the negotiating process with them. And I don't want to speak out of turn on Groundswell's behalf.
Okay, but the city apparently is looking at potentially purchasing 106.
It's not a purchase. We're deeding that to the Parks Department to support the school. Yeah, so that's 5% of this overall site that we have offered to deed that to them to support what the school is doing.
Okay,
but it's outside of the Groundswell area.
But that area on the plat is not shown as dedicated to the public.
For 106.
Yeah, I don't.
So that is because we were going to list it as conservation also. The Parks Department asked us not to note it as conservation. We have not heard back as to exactly what they want. Our expectation would be that, assuming an approval tonight, it would be conditioned upon, the planning department knowing what the Parks Department wants. We were not able to get that answer, but before that goes to the council, that we would hope to have that agreement in place with Parks. Okay. So we are fine with that being stipulated because that is very much the intention.
Okay. In your presentation, you talked about Outlot 2, which is kind of that, it's listed as private park purposes on the plat. how is that a private park surrounded by the lots? Can you elaborate on that?
Yep. So that is effectively in the middle of those single-family home lots. That is another area that we offered that we were happy to deed to the city if they wanted that. I didn't think they would want to maintain that. But keeping it as conservation obviously means that stays green space versus developing buildings on that land. So yes, Outlot 2 as conservation would be maintained as green space. And you can see on the western side there is a connector to the road to the west right there. Yep.
Right.
So yes, that's right.
Okay. That's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Alder Mianzas.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to see if Green Street would wants to answer any questions that were already raised. And also, too, I wanted to see if I met with Groundswell and Green Street on the 26th. And one thing that is not mentioned is that they reached out to Ramish to see if they can purchase the land, but Ramish wanted them to buy it outright. And if you could touch on the fact about the contingency, I think they wanted to buy it with a contingency, but Ramish said no. So talk about the importance of them working together with you and how important that is, since they don't have contingencies to buy it with contingencies. So if you want to answer any other questions that were raised and basically touch on the meeting that we had with Groundswell, please.
Joel?
Am I still unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. No, thank you, Alder. I appreciate that. So yes, that is true that Groundswell did reach out directly to Bruce Ramish, who owns the Ramish farm currently. He obviously at the moment doesn't have the ability to sell it to anybody else because it's under contract with us, but he did have a conversation with them. If this were to fall through, if Green Street could not develop the site, we want to buy the site. And third hand, what we were told in that meeting was that, he's an older gentleman, and he said, if you want to buy it, I'll sell it to you, but there'll be no contingency period. We would have to enter into a contract where you would just purchase it outright, which obviously did not work well for them, without doing kind of the necessary due diligence items. So they were happy that we were willing to engage on a kind of a contract structure that gives them the time and the ability to do that work they need to really understand what's going on. I guess the only other question that I would answer that was addressed is, we develop all over the country and we've done in our lifetime, and not to discredit the concern about the noise that has been raised throughout this, but kind of fear mongering is a very powerful tool, and we see it for lots of reasons in lots of different places. And it's very easy for people who aren't experts in the field to espouse about noise studies and about health implications and all of these different things. And as the professional folks that do this on the real estate side, we rely on experts all day long, because at the end of the day, we'll have hundreds of millions of dollars at risk with a project like this. And, people can make offhanded comments like, the Air National Guard's numbers are just bad guesses. Well, we can choose now.
I think you responded already to the Alder's question.
He said if there were any other questions, I could answer them also, though.
Okay. Are there other questions of any of our registrants? Are there any other questions of any of our registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Alder Heck.
Thank you. This is for Colin. Colin, could you just repeat what you mentioned in your staff report about the available options for us with regard to making a decision without this replatting happening automatically after 90 days, et cetera.
Yes, I can relay that. So the state subdivision statute requires that preliminary plats have some action taken on them, that can be being approved with conditions, rejected, but it has to be done within 90 days of submittal. So the timeline on this particular preliminary plat is February 27. So if no action is taken prior to February 27, or no extension is granted by the applicant, the preliminary plat is considered approved without any conditions. So it would be approved, and none of the lengthy list of conditions that we have added would be in force.
And that a referral is taking no action effectively.
Yes, that is correct.
Unless the applicant was agreeable to a referral.
Yes, the applicant would have to grant an extension to that timeline.
Okay, thanks. That was my question.
Thank you, Alder. Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. I have first a question for Colin, so that I understand that if the council were to turn down this preliminary plat, that would turn it down, right? In other words, the council has the authority to turn it. If the council does not act at all, the preliminary plat is approved without conditions. But if the council were to deny it, it would not then 3 days later be approved. Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct. If the council takes any action at all, including to deny the plat, then the plat would be denied. Or if they approved it, it would be approved with conditions.
Yeah, thank you. I have one other question of anyone on the planning staff. Have you ever encountered anything where there would have to be a disclosure to buyers of a property? I guess the main thing I would be concerned of, somebody would buy a piece of property, a house in this subdivision, somewhat unaware of the potential consequences of noise, and then be sorely disappointed. That would be a problem. How do we guarantee that disclosure will take place, at least that the people who buy will be appraised of the general outlines of the possible negative impacts? Does that make sense?
It does. I'll try that. I think it's a good question, and it's one that the Environmental Justice Work Group did ask and wrestle with to some extent. I think we have very limited ability to require that type of notice that runs with the property. The city has required deed restrictions in some cases completely unrelated to, disclosure about, noise or other characteristics of property, but that could potentially be one way to do it. I think I would hesitate to say absolutely the city can do this without first talking again with our colleagues in the city attorney's office to explore that a little further. But it's clearly it's a concern that I think is shared by many folks on the Environmental Justice Work Group, both the disclosure about the potential of noise and also what can we do to support mitigation of that noise. And it came up, I think, in a lot along the East Washington Avenue corridor, thinking about more multifamily development in that area.
Well, thank you, Heather.
Okay. Alder Miadzis.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, they kind of already covered it, but I want to see if either Heather can or Colin could elaborate more on the reason of why the environmental work group or the Common Council decided to wait until the study was done. because one of the reasons why I voted on the Common Council to voted it down was because I wanted to make sure that the study was done by the environmental work group. Can you elaborate on what the findings were?
I can start. Sure. Thank you, Chair Zellers. I will start. I did attend several of the meetings that focused on the noise issue. I know the Environmental Justice Work Group is still meeting, and my understanding is that their focus has shifted now to PFAS and water pollution, water safety. I think that, they have not submitted a formal report at this time, but discussions at what was probably their 5th or 6th meeting, I can't recall exactly which ones, seemed to land that the Environmental Justice Work Group was not planning to recommend to the Common Council any specific action related to prohibiting new residential uses within the area that is shown as a 65 decibel average by the modeling, that the maps that we've all seen in that 65 decibel area. And so that was the takeaway from those discussions of the Environmental Justice Work Group. Again, there hasn't been a formal report done by that group, but I think after learning much more about both the existing plans and the potential for residential development within that area, and the potential effectiveness of noise mitigation strategies to assist with the noise issue, particularly in the area shown as the 65 decibel area, the work group decided not to make a recommendation to prohibit residential uses. I know that, Alder Limmer, not to put Alder Limmer on the spot, but Alder Limmer did serve as the co-chair of that group in case there's any elaboration you'd like to offer.
Alder Limmer.
Thank you. I think Heather gave an excellent summary. I would only add that another consideration that went into our decision was the potential for unintended consequences as a result of making a recommendation for an overlay district or any determination against or prohibiting residential development that would have unintended consequences for folks who already have homes in the area. And in addition to looking into noise mitigation and options around that, we also wanted to look into whether there could be an update at the state level to the min-max building code around airports.
Thank you, Alder. Did you have any questions or anything? That was all you had? Okay.
That was all I had. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thanks a lot. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes. Is it possible to do an overlay and with the requirement that additional noise abatement occur for residential and commercial properties within the overlay, or is the state law building code basically disqualify us from doing that?
Heather?
Yes, right along the lines of what Alder Limmer was saying, the reason that the work group wanted to explore changes to the state statute was just that our state law in Wisconsin prohibits a city from going above and beyond what the min-max building code would do. And so a city cannot require building characteristics such as noise mitigation above and beyond what the building code requires. And one of the thoughts that came up within that work group was, could we look for a narrow exception to that around the airports in the state? That hasn't happened at this time, and I'm not sure, given the climate at the state, whether that could happen. But that was something that we felt really stuck on, I think, as a city, and instead, or also, I should say, the conversation around whenever the city is providing funding for housing, particularly affordable housing, we can indeed require measures above and beyond the building code. And so that distinction was made and is something that, we're currently contemplating and exploring in the East Washington corridor, not on this Ramish site.
One follow-up question. I'm assuming one option would be a moratorium on residential development within the 65 decibel area.
Yes, they did discuss that and decided not to advise the council at this time to move forward with that. And I just want to reiterate that on this Ramish plat, the developer has made a commitment to not construct residential in the area within that 65 decibel area. And so, I just do want to make sure that that's clear.
Right. Thank you.
Is that all, Alder? Commissioner Cantrell?
It's all. It's done.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Heather probably can answer this if I can't ask Alder Lemmer directly, but I think, as I recall, the unintended consequences, I think, of an overlay district that were mentioned were oftentimes related to, if we did restrict future residential development, that would impact the property values of homeowners who currently have properties in the 65 dB contour, inside of the 60 dB contour, and that was an important thing to consider when thinking about that. Do I have that right?
Heather?
Yes, that certainly came up, and it wasn't just a concern about the property values for homeowners, but also, redevelopment in neighborhoods that don't have a lot of active uses, things to walk to. Obviously what we're seeing as a city is a lot of mixed use redevelopment that includes a lot of residential and some commercial, but there was a concern that if this is just all of a sudden stopped, neighborhoods within the 65 decibel area just wouldn't see investment. And whether that is an impact on the property value of a homeowner or an impact on the livability of the area, both of those things were discussed at the Environmental Justice Work Group.
Thank you.
Did you have any further questions, Alder?
No, thanks.
Thank you. Alder Myatzis.
I always try to think about Miyagi, but with a Z. Miyagi.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I'm not sure I'm going to do it right the next time either, but thank you.
Yeah, just one more question for Heather. I don't know if you're able to, I personally went on Zello and tried to see, because the F-35s are coming and a lot of people's concerns, is there any way to see how many homes are being sold because of the F-35s are coming versus being bought? So I saw that everything's being bought up. Nobody's really selling their houses. Can you pull something up? I wish I could share with you what I found, but
Heather?
I wish I had something handy. It's a good question, Alder Miyadzi. I'm afraid everything that I know is anecdotal at this point, but we could take a look at all of the turnover, the selling and buying of homes across the city, and try to see if there's any sort of a geographic pattern that would show us that more turnover was happening in this area. It's not something that we've looked at, and it would take some time to pull together for sure. But it's not something I unfortunately can pull up. I wish I had that ability, but it's a great question.
Thank you, Heather. Any follow-ups? No. Okay. Are there any further questions of staff? Any further questions of staff? Commissioner Fernandez.
Do we know when the F-35s will actually be here and we can actually see, observe, listen to the sound levels that are there? What year is that projected to happen?
Heather, do you know that?
I can't recall the earliest date. I know it's still at least a couple or 3 years out until the F-35s would be here. And then the thought is that there is a period of time where they'll be kind of adjusting to this new location, test flights, et cetera. I think it's I don't know if it's another year after that, but it's sometime after they arrive that would be considered like the new normal rate of flights. And so it's years off until we will have that actual data from the noise.
Thank you, Heather. Any further questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I would be looking for a motion. Oh. Alder Myadz.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if I asked that question of Joel, if is there any way that he can, if he has any data as far as about the houses being sold in my district?
The public.
I think he has data on that.
Yeah, we have closed the public hearing. We would have to reopen the public hearing. Do you think that this will have an impact on the question being considered, Alder? Is that why you're looking for that?
Well, it's important that while people are raising the questions about F-35s, I just think it's important that people know that how houses is still a demand, and that I'm, as an alder, is going to be advocating for funding for sound litigation, but I'm not going to stop any kind of rightful economic development. So it's important to have that information that houses are still being bought over here.
Do commissioners, are you okay with reopening the public hearing? Could you just like nod your heads if you're okay with that? Okay. Okay. It looks like people are okay. I will reopen the public hearing then. And then if we could hear from the developer on that question, Joel Oliver. Joel?
Hi, okay, I'm back. So I don't believe I can share my screen. I can anecdotally relate to you. So we did have our staff go in and do an analysis of home sales and then pending home sales around the airport, all around the airport, not just near our site. The anecdotal information, that we were able to pull from sales data was that there had been no change. Houses are still selling for a consistent, price per square foot as other parts of Madison, which would, imply that people listing their homes for sales and people buying homes, and this not being we view kind of hidden, unknown facts, and obviously the Jets coming to Madison's not a hidden or unknown fact. So that data set was about 500 sales that we looked through, and there was not an impact that we saw disproportionate in this area versus the rest of Madison. I believe we also looked at the Vermont area, but I won't opine on that for this.
Okay, thank you.
We're happy to, Alder, we're happy to provide that to you later if that would be useful too, if you'd like us to.
Thank you, Joel. Are there any follow-up questions of Joel while we have him here? Seeing no raised hands, I will again close the public hearing and ask again, are there further questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, is there a motion? Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I'm going to recommend that the Plan Commission forward the zoning map amendments. And I'm not going to read them all, but as provided in the staff report, and the preliminary plat of Ramish Farm Development subdivision to the Common Council with a recommendation of approval with the all the conditions the staff report.
And do I have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Shepard. Would you like to speak to your motion, Commissioner Cantrell?
Yes. This plat has been around for a long time, and I've seen at least three. This is the third version, at least I've seen of it, since I've been on the Plan Commission, and so it's not a rush through. I'm concerned about the F-35 noise, but the subdivision plat complies with the subdivision ordinance and all the city requirements, dedications and stormwater requirements. So I don't think the Plan Commission has any other option except to forward this on to the Common Council for approval. And I think that this developer has listened to the neighborhood, and the urban agriculture is an issue. And I think that hopefully the developer will work with the group and address that. I think he's willing to do that. Excuse me. But I think that obviously that group needs to buy the land, and we can't be a party of that. So again, I believe the plat complies with the subdivision ordinance, and that's why and the comprehensive plan, and that's why I'm recommending that it be forwarded to the council. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other comments? Alder Heck.
Thank you. Just a brief explanation of why I'm going to support this motion as much as it pains me. The F-35s are a plague on our city, and it's going to be, I think, we've heard so much from people in Vermont that it's much worse than what was anticipated. And I don't think that's just rhetoric. Maybe some of it is, but it's really going to be awful. But, I even found a crack this evening where I could vote no on this. And that was what Mark Voss had to say about if this land were to be owned by some form of community land trust, that some of the concerns about unintended consequences about residential development would be mitigated because they wouldn't be concerned about impacts on the value of the land and things like that, which is, what we were talking about briefly just a minute ago. But I don't think that, as Commissioner Cantrell said, that we can get involved in negotiations and concerns about when that could happen, whether it's for the entire piece or a portion of the piece. Unfortunately, I just don't think we can. And so I'm going to support this motion and hope that Mr. Oliver comes through with and continues to work with the stakeholders and finds an urban agriculture component for at least a piece of this. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Other comments? Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say briefly that I really appreciate both Commissioner Cantrell's and Alder Heck's comments. I'm also going to support this motion for exactly the same reasons, despite being very concerned about the noise. And I will say I have a lot of experience with noise analysis, and not all decibels are created equally. I learned in highway noise that there are all kinds of measures, dB and dBA, that how it's averaged can make a great deal of difference. And what I'm saying is that the people who have testified at the hearing may also be correct. That the modeling of this I'm not even familiar with the particular decibel measurement that they're using. They're averaging in some way that I'm not familiar with, but you could have some very high noise levels, which if you decided to average them over 10-minute period would come out pretty reasonable. So all I'm saying is that I really respect the comments that are there. I'm very concerned about the noise level. I'm very concerned about the F-35s, and I'm still going to support this motion because I think that the developer is doing the best job they can, and it's not within our purview to turn that down.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Miadzi?
Oh, that was perfect. No, I just wanted to say something. Me as an alder, I definitely do support Green Street's proposal. This is a solid proposal that includes affordable housing, environmental protection, sound mitigation, and a developer that has shown a willingness to listen and to concerns and to even address them. If we're serious about adding desperate needed affordable and workforce housing and prioritize equity, this proposal does that. And that's why I definitely think that we should approve this.
Thank you, Alder. Any other comments before we come to a vote? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you to everybody who came to testify about this and to the developer. It's a difficult one. Next is business by members. Is there any business by members? Then will be the secretary's report. Heather.
Thank you, Chair. Looking back at the recent Common Council actions, things were approved as recommended by the Commission. Our February 21st meeting will have, hopefully, a staff update on the Mayor's Housing Forward initiative, some of which the Commission has been deeply involved in. That'll either be to you on February 21st or shortly thereafter. And then I think we'll also have the Planning Division's annual report will be shared with you prior to our meeting of the 21st, and I can provide a really quick overview of that. I think I'll move ahead to the March 7th meeting. We'll have a demolition and conditional use on the north side on Dryden Drive for a 45-unit apartment building, and then a zoning text amendment related to streetery, so outdoor eating and the use of streets, which many of you, I'm sure, have seen and experienced since the pandemic began. So an ordinance amendment related to that. And then moving on further down the list, a very significant batch of ordinance amendments and 2 official mapping recommendations related to the Oscar Mayer Special Area Plan. And this is a long time in coming. It's a very complex set of changes, and we tried our best to learn a lot from our Milwaukee Street Special Area Plan experience with the Plan Commission, Transportation Planning and Policy Board, and Council. And we split these up into several, some of them are still multifaceted, but we tried to split it up into 8 separate ordinances that would be before you. And what we'll do is we'll have a staff report that covers all of them and a presentation to walk the Commission through these changes. But generally, they're all consistent with the recommendations in the adopted plan. And that, I think, is where I will leave it for this evening. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're at that time. I would be looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Cantrell, seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. Thank you all, and I will see you on February 21st, if not before. Take care.